What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina Valentin.
Welcome to today's Feeding of the Wolf. My guest today is Paul Kearney, who manages a beautiful castle in northern Italy called Castello di Casalbergone, a place based on the elegance of silence. For 15 years, however, Paul Kearney was working as an international project manager with companies like Coca-Cola. So a very different career and focus of living. And that's what we will be diving into today, the possibilities of going from corporate to consciousness. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Kat. Great to be here. I'm excited.
Wonderful. So as far as I understand, you were pretty successful in your corporate job in Ireland and, going along fine in that path that we're supposed to take in life. So what was it that made you look for something different, that made you end up here in the castle in Italy?
Well, I'd always been looking for something different. And I had taught Tai Chi and yoga and meditation and I had loved that. And then Access came along, Access Consciousness. And for me, it was a whole different level. And it opened up a different space for me. And I really enjoyed all the tools that were available, and I was using them in a corporate setting, but I knew there was more, and I knew I wanted to be more in the world.
So you had already done yoga and Tai Chi. So what's the difference between these tools of consciousness that actually made you take the step out of the corporate world and into something different that yoga and Tai Chi didn't at the time?
Yeah, I get it was my overall life, if you know what I mean, like your whole life. And it was like, I remember when I told someone who I worked with that I was leaving a successful job to join Access Consciousness, he was like, "Oh my God, Paul is joining the Mormon." And it was like
well, you say your whole life changed. What was it that changed? Like when you start to use the tools and you using them in the corporate world, as said, but also your general life. So what was it that changed? Is there a way for you to describe it?
Yeah, just I get a lot more relaxed and just realizing that the universe has your back and it's like trusting me more. And I think I was kind of using the corporate structure as the right way to live, or this is the way everybody is doing normal. And it's like, oh, I've ticked this box and ticked this box and ticked this box. But there was a huge part of my being that wasn't happy. Like it knew that there was more. And it was like, okay. And then when I met Gary and Dane and met all you guys, it was like, wow, there's a totally different possibility, which I'd never considered before. And my life became a lot easier, a lot more joyful, a lot more happy. And it was following that energy.
And I love that when you're saying you start to trust the universe, because that's really, I think so many people stay in jobs that I think I saw a statistic the other day that 60% of people in the UK actually don't enjoy their jobs at all. And they kind of they describe it as like just being there, sitting off the time so they can get their paycheck at the end of the month. And yet they don't leap. They don't choose something different because it's the only thing that somehow, they think works. So that willingness to trust the universe. So when this castle came up, how did you end up as a manager of the castle?
So I was working with Gary and Dane on the European company, and I've been involved in the setting up of the taxation system and the accounting system with the castle. So I was kind of in the background of it. Then one of the manager left, so there's a period where there wasn't a manager, and I kind of got the awareness that I could be a contribution, but I wasn't maybe courageous enough to even broach Gary about it. I remember talking to a friend and saying, "No, just say it to Gary." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure." And then maybe 2 months later, it's one of the things I learned is you trust the timing of the universe. And I was like, 2 months later, me and David Kubas, who's the project manager for the castle, were having a chat with Gary. And I was kind of, look, I can be a contribution. And he was like, okay, go over and have a look at it for 2 weeks. And that was 2 years ago at this stage. So, my God, we went through a lot of stuff. But it was just that willing to explore and willing to ask questions and to say, okay, what can I contribute here? What's possible? Because the beauty and elegance of the castle is so magical. It kind of pulls in so many people. So it's like, it started the question really of what's truly possible here.
So now you're working in the castle and it's owned by a group of people. And one of them is Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, and he is directly involved in running the castle. So what is that like? What is it like to work with somebody who functions most of the time, at least, from consciousness?
Yeah, and it's literally every 10 seconds. Because one of the things I realized recently is like Gary speaks to us infinite being to infinite being. Like there's no limitation in these worlds, and he demands a lot. He demands things to be done to a certain standard and to be done to a certain way. And one of the things that I love about Gary is his awareness of the future. Like one of the things that we did at Christmas time, all the people who had stayed at the castle, we sent them a handwritten card and a box of chocolates, and it was like sent it out to them. And like the amounts of messages of goodwill, happiness, energy that it created was incredible. And it's like, it came from me sending a photograph to Gary about a bottle of wine, and there happened to be a box of chocolates in the background. And Gary saw it, and like he's just such a genius. He was like, okay, send out a box of chocolates to everybody who stayed at the castle. And it's like, it's so different the way he looks at contribution and what can be a contribution, rather than before where I was doing very stereotypical business from form and structure. This is the way it should look. And it's like things never change. Compared to here, things are always changing.
So can you give an example of where you were trying to run the castle from a more corporate point of view and Gary showed you another way?
Yeah, so staff management, which is one that comes up for a lot of people because a lot of people have businesses. And I was trying to micromanage it and make sure everything was perfect. And Gary was like, hey, dude, you're micromanaging this. And I was like, okay, so what do I need to do? And he was saying, actually, step back, tell people, okay, this is what we'd like to create. And then watch who steps up and who doesn't. And that's what I did. And it was actually, as I stepped back, it actually gave a space for other people to step up. And like the staff were a little bit nervous at the start. They were kind of like, hey, Paul, I'm not sure we can do this. And I was like, look, I trust you guys. You can do it. We can all do it. We know we have the systems in place. And it created a space where they could step into it, and they became more creative, more enthusiastic, more joyful. And they started doing different projects. And it was an example for me where, okay, if I do control, it shuts things down. If I actually open the spaces and look for the open spaces, it creates more. What's
one of the weirdest things he's asked you to do?
Oh, so many. One of the ones is at the castle, we have these beautiful duvets. So it's like one of the rules at the castle is no sex on the duvet. So it was like this was there. Like people always got a lot of laughter out of it, let's say. But I get Gary setting a standard for the way he wants it run. So he asked me to get a UV light to inspect all the duvets in the castle. And I actually thought he was joking. So I was like, aha, that's very funny, Gary. And then like a couple of months later, he's like, have you done it yet? And I was like, oh, I didn't realize you were serious. And he's like, I was totally serious. And I had been watching a show on Carl Ritz, who set up the Ritz hotels. And like he drove a new standard of hygiene that had never been seen in the hotel industry, a new level of elegance, a new level of decadence. And it's Gary's attention to detail is incredible. Like he says, the difference between a good job and a great job is details. And it's like being willing to go into the details. And what he was showing me there was you need to be willing to look at every detail, inspect everything, know that everything is done to the standard, but opening a new space as well. And it's like we look to do that for everything. We look to give our clients an incredible experience, and that everything is new, that they can experience the elegance, the beauty of 200-300 years ago, but also get the sense of them as a being and that level of beauty.
So what do you think is the biggest difference of working in a corporate environment and working the way you are now, with choosing every 10 seconds, having that attention to detail, which you also can have in a corporate environment, right?
Yeah,
Totally. But having that in a way that is based way more on the awareness of what actually is required. So can you say like 3 things that is really different now, the way you work and what you've learned over the years compared to when you were working in a more corporate environment?
Yeah, I think definitely like the structure, where it's like structure versus systems. And like it sounds so simple, structure versus systems, it's a huge difference. So structure where is like a concrete building and it's like it will not move, it will not change. Compared systems are completely transferable, movable, shiftable. It's like nature that it flows. So it's like a forest. If one tree falls down, everything else adjusts and moves and shapes and shifts. It doesn't mean that the whole thing stops. And it's like being willing to choose in every 10 seconds and just change anything at the drop of a hat. And it's like, I think that's probably another one that I would say, like a man rang me from Germany, a castle owner from Germany. He said, Paul, you're the only castle in Italy, France, and Germany that I've seen that's actually grown through the COVID period and seem to be thriving. And I was talking to Gary about that, and he was saying it's our willingness to change. A lot of the time, companies, they get one product and this is the golden bullet, this is the magic answer, and this is all that we do. Remember, with Access Consciousness and with the castle, we're always looking at multiple income streams. What else can we add? What else can we put in? And it's like, as you develop those, they grow, and it grows in the most unusual of situations. You never know what's going to come up next.
Those are 2 brilliant ones. Do you have a third?
Yeah, being fluid. Yeah, being fluid with everything, that everything is changeable, and that I think with people, with systems, but even just with your own thought process, it's like being willing to change, look at things like, okay, cool, I need to do this differently, and do it different. So actually choose to do something different. And it's like, okay, what can we do different here than what we've done before? And then it just starts opening a new space, and trusting the staff as well to allow them to come up with ideas, because now more and more we all come up with ideas together. We're like, okay, cool, let's try this. Okay, that worked awesome. Okay, cool, let's try this. That worked awesome. Okay, let's try this. Okay, that one didn't work so awesome. Let's do something different. And it's like that willingness to change, to move, and it's really always being in the question.
And Gary often talks about it's not the same to change and to do something different. Can you explain the difference between changing something you do and doing something completely different?
Yeah, it's actually a great point. I was reading that in the Gentleman's Club recently, where it's like a lot of the time what we do is we're doing something and we slightly modify it. So we say, okay, now this will work. Now, rather than actually doing something different, is where you take an action. And when you take an action, everybody listens and everything changes. When you go into reaction, nobody listens and nothing changes. So it's actually being willing to say, okay, we're doing something completely different here, and then just totally change it. Like with the social media, which I always find is an interesting example. We were like the most followed castle in Italy and one of the most followed in Europe. And Gary said, we stop all social media. He just got this awareness the end of April. So we stopped it, and our sales went up by around 30%. And it was like, for me, we went from looking to be chosen to becoming the choosing, and saying, okay, we pick who comes here. We know our spaces, we know our business. And it's like that change from looking to being chosen to become the choosing made a big difference.
And I remember you were quite hesitant at the time when Gary asked you to stop all social media. Yeah. So how did you deal with that? Like your own kind of doubt for this choice, and then also having the trust in Gary. Like what happened for you?
Yeah, it's a process. It was, because I remember talking to you and talking to a couple of other people. It's like, oh, guys, I'm really not sure we should be doing this. And we'd invested a lot in it. Like, it was, it had, like, in this reality, it had been successful. But I remember asking the castle, do you want social media? And the answer I got back was no. It was just like, no, I don't need it. And it was like, it was actually my need for validation that it's like, we're doing a good job. Look, we prove we're the top on Instagram, we're the top on Facebook, rather than actually listening to the castle. And one of the things I've learned is just relax and receive. Allow the castle as an entity that it is to actually just pull the people in. And I've seen that with staff in particular. Like some people come in here and they're a totally natural fit. It's like they've always been here. After 2 or 3 days, there's other people who come in like with big CVs, big reputations, and they don't even last 2 days. And it's like the castle kind of, the people it loves, it embraces. The people it doesn't, it's just like, no, you're out of here. So yeah, it's kind of willing to be that demand in my own life. That's what I'm asking for. Yeah.
Well, also it actually taught you how to listen even more to the castle.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it made it far easier for me. Like as an example, with hiring staff, I used to like be on LinkedIn and doing interviews and all this stuff. And then one day we had like 2 or 3 days to go to a big event, and we were down to one waiter because a number of people were sick and stuff. I remember asking the castle, say, okay, castle, I need at least 2 waiters or waitresses. And it was like handing it over, and everyone's going to say, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm asking the castle. And the very next day, this guy turned up who was awesome. He still works with us. And I was like, okay, brilliant. Let's hire him. And then, do you know anybody else? Oh, my wife is a waitress and she's available. And the 2 of them have worked with us for 6 months now. So it's, yeah, trust the universe. Yeah, trust the universe.
And trust the castle. That was a beautiful way of describing that. So this summer, you had one of the other bigger owners there, Dane here. So what was that like? What was it like what did that change for you when he was there and he also talked with his staff and had some interactions with them in a different way?
It was magical. Dane is just fantastic. He's so positive and so sees the bigger picture. And I think for us, it was great as well because we'd kind of gone through COVID, just working away. I think a lot of people probably weren't aware of all the things we were creating. And when somebody comes and can actually see it and experience the food, experience the standards, and like Dane was excited. He was like, wow, I own a castle. And it was almost like it arrived to these worlds a bit more. So it was like, it was cool. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I noticed that seemed to create so much was the gratitude that he had. And I was actually wondering what that created for the staff when that was expressed so clearly to them.
Yeah, it was huge because we've quite a few new staff, then we've some staff who've been with us for a long period, but like some of them had never met Gary, had never met Dane, so like they'd heard of these people, but they didn't know them. And when you actually get to meet them and see the caliber of the people, see the kindness of the person, and it's like also you trust the vision a lot more because it's like, oh wow, these guys do know what they're doing. And it's like that level. So on the last day, we brought all the staff up and everybody in the class was just applauding. And for them, my sense was they were kind of amazed. They'd never received anything like that. And it was like, they were kind of like, wow, I'm cooking vegetables in the kitchen as an example, but my role is actually super important. And these people actually acknowledge it, and Dane acknowledged it. And it was kind of, it gave everybody a new sense of purpose to an extent. It was kind of like, okay, cool. Yeah. It's like people see me and acknowledge what I'm doing. And it's like, how does it get any better than that? Yeah.
So for you also moved from Ireland to Italy, and you've been living there for 2 years, which is a huge change in somebody's life to move to a different country further south where they speak a completely different language. So what has that been like for you? And what has it changed for you to move in that way?
Yeah, it was a huge adventure, really. And it still is. It's like, I was 2 weeks in Italy and 2 weeks in Ireland, and then COVID came and I was there for 6 months. So I couldn't get back to Ireland, and I fell in love with Italy. I traveled all over Italy, just fell in love with the food, the people, the culture. It's a magical place. And it's like, there's a certain level of almost like crazy creativeness in Italy, and you have to embrace that. Like, even when you go into a cafe, it's going to be chaotic, it's going to be all over the place, but it's magical. And it's like, once you can relax into that, it's wonderful. Super people, really, really cool places. And it's, for me, it's one of the most beautiful countries on the planet.
Would there be a sum of money that anybody could offer you that would make you go back to the more corporate way of living or creating your life?
I don't think I'd be alive if I went back to that way of living. It was like there was a part of my soul that was dying, and it was like it was actually acknowledging, like, one of the great things with the tools of Access Consciousness, it empowers you to create your own life, and you acknowledge, wow, every choice creates. And no, I had somebody came to me recently and asked me to be director for their company, to take over the whole company, and I turned them down. And it was a large sum of money, but I was like, wow, it's like when you're working with Access, it's magic, but it's the people you get to work with, like working with you, with Gary, with Dane, with Simone, with all these cool people, and just it's continually creating all the time. But you're aware of the futures that you're creating.
Yeah, it's like I realize when you're talking, it's about creating everything, our lives, the future, all the businesses we work with, and they're all interconnected. They're not separate.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's one of the things as well. You can be involved with maybe 10, 20 projects running simultaneously, and they can be going all over the place. And it's like, but it's enjoyable. It's fun. It's like, okay, cool. Where do I need to put my attention now? What's fun? And just one small change can open up everything. So it's it's exciting.
So if somebody's listening to this right now and they're stuck in, the squirrel wheel or whatever it's called in English, I know it's called the squirrel wheel in Swedish, where they don't really know, like, what would you suggest they could start with, just starting to use the tools of consciousness in their life and their business? Like, what would be one or two things that you would recommend for them?
One of the things is I like to look at the bigger picture and then kind of break it down, and it's like, see what's required. What I'd actually look at is, what energy do you want your life to be like in 10 years time? And just start, for me, I'm quite visual, so like I'll often draw pictures or start like writing things, and then it's kind of, you're almost putting a message out to the universe. Okay, this is what I want. And then the kind of pragmatic part of me comes in then, and I kind of say, okay, cool, break it down into, let's say, your relationship, your family, where you live, your job. And it's like, start looking and just see what type of energies do you want. And when you invite them in and just start asking for them, they start to show up, and then the breadcrumbs will come along. Just follow the breadcrumbs. So literally, like something may just energetically, it just kind of it matches something. It's like, okay, cool, talk to this person, or have a look at that website, and just keep following that, because it kind of, what works for you. And when you actually acknowledge that and follow that, the most beautiful spaces open up.
So how do they start trusting the universe?
I would say I'm in the middle of that process. Number one is definitely letting go of control, and that's not such an easy one for me. It's like I'm a control freak, and it's like you have to be willing to just let things be chaotic. And it's like in the corporate setting, everything is controlled, it's regulated. It's like you grow the business 5 or 10% a year, and it's like Access can be doing double, triple that easily. Like, and it's like when you let go of that way of thinking that everything has to be controlled and that everything has to have a fixed, predictable outcome, then new spaces can open up. And it's actually being willing to ask the question, am I doing control here, or am I doing chaos? And when you instill more chaos, it creates more.
I love that. So basically you're asking them to become more chaotic.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's something, if somebody said that to me 10 years ago, I was like, Jesus, no, I need to go the other way. I need to be more organized, more this. And it's like, it's not so much fun. For the beauty that your soul is, like, we are the creators, we are the poets, we are the the beauty of this world. And it's like we create that. And it's like when you actually acknowledge that and move towards that energy, even, and it's like it can be as uncomfortable as hell. Like you can feel like, geez, really feels weird. And it's like, but like when I see what we're creating with the castle, with the level of beauty, the level of joy with the staff, the stuff that's getting created, it's actually acknowledging that and saying, okay, cool. It's like there's always going to be more. The universe will always provide more.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I think we end on that note. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming on.
Thank you, Kat. My pleasure.
And telling us about the possibilities that comes when you embrace chaos and trust the universe.
Yeah.
Great. Goodbye for now.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit KatrinaValentin.com/wolf.